Liberty Mills Homestead. My name is Chris. In this video, I'm going to go over a few articles in the church news about recent temple dedications or rededications. These articles all seem to kind of go together, and the way I've got them sequenced out here kind of shows the timeline, at least these first two articles. So the first article is from April 9th, and the Manti Temple was already rededicated on April 21st. But this article on April 9th, the title says Elder Rasband is going to rededicate the Manti, Utah Temple on April 21st. We'll go over this article. And then the next article is from April 21st, the day of the dedication. And the title is President Nelson, in a surprise appearance, rededicates the historic Manti, Utah Temple. So originally it was planned that Elder Rasband was going to do it. And that was even put out on the church news. And then on the 21st, surprisingly, President Nelson shows up and does the rededication. Another article that we're going to go over is from April 28th, titled, Why First Presidency Involvement in Three Latest Temple Events is Noteworthy. And if you guys watch Christian Homestead, Jared talks a lot about bookends, especially with President Nelson's tenure as president of the church. And this article here has a potential bookend. And then another article in the church news has President Nelson's dedication blessing on the Manti, Utah Temple. I'm going to read just 2 or 3 paragraphs of that. I'm not going to go over the whole thing. And then President Oaks recently dedicated the Filipino Temple in Urdaneta. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but in the Philippines. And this is his dedicatory prayer, and we're going to read a couple paragraphs of that as well. And before we jump into these articles, I just want to quickly mention the third article I'm going to go over, the significance of why the First Presidency involvement in the 3 latest temple events is noteworthy. This is a very long article, so I understand if you want to skip through parts of it. If you want to listen to it all, that's okay, but there's a lot in here, a lot of statistics and history and things like that. But at least listen to the first part of when I'm going over this article, because there's some interesting stuff at the beginning here. Again, if you want to skip over the end of the article, that's fine. Anyways, back to the first article, and let's get into this. All right, so to get started, this article from April 9th that announces Elder Rasband is going to be the one rededicating the Manti, Utah Temple. It says, the First Presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has announced that Elder Ronald A. Rasband of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles will rededicate the Manti, Utah Temple on Sunday, April 21st. It will be done in one afternoon session. The First Presidency previously announced the April 21st dedication date, along with the temple's March 11th media day and the open house running from March 14th to April 5th, which if you guys had a chance to go, it was a really busy open house. A lot of people were there. A lot of people showed up to go through the Manti Temple. Myself and my family, my wife and children, we were able to go down and go to this. We had tickets reserved. Even with the reservation, we still had to wait in line about 2.5 hours. There were a lot of people that showed up without reservations, and they had to wait in line for about 4.5 hours. And to my understanding, it was like that every day of the open house, which again went from March 14th to April 5th. And when I was there waiting in line for 2.5 hours, I had a lot of time to think. And one of the things I thought about was the Salt Lake Temple, and what is it going to be like when the Salt Lake Temple is rededicated. Then I thought, it took 40 years to build the Salt Lake Temple. And I didn't look this up. I didn't research this. Maybe I should have. But just going off memory, I think when they dedicated the Salt Lake Temple, I think there were parades and party is not the right word, but parades and celebrations and things like that. It was a big event, a really important event in the restoration. So I wonder, when the Salt Lake Temple is rededicated, is it going to be the same way? I imagine there's going to be millions of people show up. A lot more than even showed up for the Manti, Utah Temple open house. But also, are they going to organize parades? Are they going to organize celebrations and festivities throughout the stakes of the church, not just in Salt Lake? I'm not sure. They haven't really talked about that. Anyways, Back to the Manti Temple here. It said that the original announcement noted that additional information regarding the rededication, including the times and all that, would be announced at a future date. So now they're saying all that's been announced. It's going to be Elder Rasband doing the dedication. It's going to be April 21st. The announcement of Elder Rasband's rededication assignment was first published on Tuesday, April 9th on churchofjesuschrist.org. So this was an official announcement, an official decision. It doesn't seem like it was planned at all that President Nelson was going to show up and do the dedication. Then it talks about the Manti rededication being broadcast to all units within the Manti Temple District and all that. Talks about the open house being completed. Then it talks a little bit about the Manti Temple's history and renovation. We're not going to go over that in this video, but it is in this article if you guys want to go and read it yourselves. I'm going to have the links for all these articles in the video description, as I do in all of my videos. So the next article was from the day of the dedication. President Nelson, in a surprise appearance, rededicates the historic Manti, Utah Temple. And there's a picture of him out there right in front of I think this is the north side of the temple. And the article says, President Russell M. Nelson rededicated the Manti, Utah Temple on Sunday, April 21st as a house of peace, a house of comfort, and a house of personal revelation. President Nelson's participation in the rededication of the temple, originally dedicated nearly 136 years ago in May 1888, was a surprise to members in Sanpete County. President Nelson said, "We build temples to honor the Lord. And it sounds like, based on the article, President Nelson's 8 great-grandparents lived in Sanpete County near the Manti, Utah Temple. I'm not sure if that's why he decided to show up and do this or not, but he said, temples are built for worship and not for show. We make sacred covenants of eternal significance inside these sacred walls." So although the temples are very beautiful, the design, the architecture, the materials, everything about temples is beautiful. They're built to be the best that they can be. The church doesn't hold back any expenses. But President Nelson says these temples are built for worship, not for show. And there's another picture of President Nelson. They're in a wheelchair. President Nelson was joined by his wife, Sister Wendy Nelson, Elder Ronald A. Rasband, so he still went, and Ronald A. Rasband's wife, Melanie Rasband, and a few general authorities. Elder Kevin R. Duncan, he's in the 70, and he's an executive director of the Temple Department, and his wife, and then who is Nancy Duncan, and then Elder Kevin W. Pearson, General Authority 70, and President of the Church's Utah area, and his wife, Sister June Pearson. The article says, during the rededication, leaders honored the pioneers in the area, including those who sacrificed and supported the efforts to build the temple. They also looked forward, inviting members to attend the temple as often as possible. And I had at least a few family members in that area. One of my ancestors is William Fowler. He authored the song, "We Thank Thee, O God, for a Prophet." He immigrated from England when he joined the church. Him and his wife, they ended up down in Manti. I think that's where Brigham Young had directed them to be. And he ended up dying pretty young due to some health complications that resulted from his travel across the plains to Utah when he was a pioneer. But he lived in Manti. He is buried in Manti, just right across the street from the temple there. But he never lived to see the temple built and dedicated. The article continues. Some 2,200 people gathered in the temple for the rededication. And then the rededication was also broadcast in a single session throughout the 23 stakes in that temple district. Members also had regular church meetings earlier in the day. And they said it was a day marked by blue skies and spring flowers. President Nelson said the church is building many additional temples so that great temple blessings will be more accessible to faithful families around the world. And he said, "I invite you to make temple worship a regular part of your life as often as your personal circumstances allow." So that's different for everyone. but as often as your personal circumstances allow. Regular worship in the temple will inoculate you against the persuasive poisons of the adversary. This is President Nelson. Temple worship will strengthen you to meet the challenges of everyday life. I promise you that. Sister Nelson said that as magnificent as the renewed Manti Temple is, this temple is so much more than a building, so much more than a structure or an edifice. This Manti Temple is the Lord's invitation to experience God and all that He has in store for His faithful children on both sides of the veil. I think the key paragraph in this article is, or I'll just read it again quickly, President Nelson saying, I invite you to make temple worship a regular part of your life, as often as your personal circumstances allow. Doing so will change your lives. Regular worship in the temple will inoculate you against the persuasive poisons of the adversary. Temple worship will strengthen you to meet the challenges of everyday life. I promise you that. And then moving on to the next article, why they're talking about the 3 latest temple dedications or rededications and why the First Presidency's involvements in those is noteworthy. So the last 3 temples to be dedicated or rededicated, at least the date of this article, which was April 28th, was President Nelson, the Manti Temple, President Oaks in the temple in the Philippines, and then President Eyring, and off the top of my head, I don't remember where that one is. I think that was St. George, Utah. The article says, in the past 35 days, each of the 3 members of the First Presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have, in succession, either dedicated a new temple or rededicated a renovated house of the Lord. And then it has a timeline here. On March 24th, 2024, President Henry B. Eyring, second counselor in the First Presidency, dedicated the Red Cliffs, Utah Temple in St. George. So that's a new temple. On April 21st, President Russell M. Nelson, president of the church, rededicated the recently renovated and historic Manti, Utah Temple in a surprise unannounced appearance in Utah's Sanpete County. So that one wasn't planned. And on Sunday, April 28th, President Dallin H. Oaks, first counselor in the First Presidency, dedicated the Urdaneta, Philippines Temple in the namesake city. So President Eyring, President Nelson, and President Oaks, all within less than 5 weeks, they each dedicated the temple. The article continues saying, 3 First Presidency members, 3 temple dedications or rededications in succession, and all in 36 days. So 3 First Presidency members, 3 temple dedications, 36 days. And then it says, while such a 3-for-3 occurrence of the First Presidency members doing these temple milestones might have been commonplace in decades past, it merits some special mention in 2024, given 3 things they list out. And those 3 things are, number 1, President Nelson, President Oaks, and President Eyring are all in their 90s, and yet each traveled and participated in the temple events, including offering the dedicatory prayer and rededicatory prayers at the 3 houses of the Lord. So each of them are in their 90s, which is pretty amazing in and of itself when you think about it, because while we do see their age, and each time we see them, we can see that they're getting a little bit older, it still seems amazing that they're actually in their 90s and they're doing all these things. And President Nelson, we know, is a lot of times in a wheelchair. And then number 2, it says, it has been 5 years since 3 temples were dedicated or rededicated in succession by 3 different members of the First Presidency. It's been a little bit more than 5 years, not quite 6 years, but the last time that happened, the article is going to go on and mention, was in 2018, which was the first year of President Nelson's tenure as president of the church, the first year where this First Presidency was organized. And so, like I mentioned, how Jared at Christian Homestead talks about bookends. It happened in the first year of their First Presidency, and now it's happened again. Now what that means, if that's a coincidence or just nothing of significance, I don't know. And then number 3, more than 70% of the 48 houses of the Lord dedicated or rededicated during President Nelson's time as church president have been done not by members of the First Presidency, but by members of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. So only 30% of the temples dedicated during President Nelson's tenure as president of the church, 30% of those have been done by Quorum of the 12 Apostles. By members of the First Presidency. 70% by Quorum of the 12 Apostles. So 30%, but then to have 3 in a row, the odds are even lower that that's going to happen. The article continues. Here's a look at each of the 3 points that we just went over, plus a bonus list of previous times when 3 temples were dedicated in succession by a different member of the same First Presidency. The first one, an active nonagenarian First Presidency, and nonagenarian means in their 90s, teaching of and involved with temples. President Nelson rededicated the Manti Temple 5 months shy of his 100th birthday. That's just amazing. President Oaks dedicated the Urdaneta Temple 3+ months before turning 92. So he's almost 92. President Nelson's 99. And President Eyring dedicated the Red Cliffs Temple 2 months before his 91st birthday. So he is almost 91. President Oaks is almost 92. And President Nelson's almost 100. Together, they are nearly a full year into being the church's first nonagenarian First Presidency. So that's the first time we've had a First Presidency this old, all 3 of them. And the 3 continue to lead, direct, minister, and testify of the importance of ordinances performed and covenants made in the house of the Lord. They are not only teaching of temples and directing the expansion of temples, they are on site and actively involved in that work, as evidenced by the recent dedications and rededication. This makes me think of King Benjamin in the Book of Mormon when he's giving his sermon, and he talks about how he spent his entire life in the service of his people, and he's been out there working alongside with them. And then later in the Book of Mormon, we read about Zeniff, and Zeniff was a king, and in his advanced age, he had to fight for his people. He went out and joined his people to fight against the Lamanites. So that's what true leaders do. They go out and they work and they fight right alongside the people next to them. They don't tell everyone else to go do it while they sit back and rest and relax and take it easy. In fact, they're probably out there doing a lot more as far as focus on the work of the Lord goes, because a lot of us have other things in our lives. We're a lot younger. We have families. We have other work and things like that. But as far as just like pure time spent on serving the Lord and serving others, they're a lot more involved in that because of the position of life that they're in. But they're doing it. They're not just sitting back and relaxed and enjoying retirement, so to speak. And then it says, and sandwiched in between presiding at the 3 temple milestone events, the 3 members of the First Presidency not only attended in-person sessions of the April 2024 General Conference, but shared messages on the importance of temples and on covenants made in the house of the Lord. The temple is the gateway to the greatest blessings God has in store for each of us. The temple is the only place on earth where we may receive all the blessings promised to Abraham. President Nelson said at the conclusion of the Sunday afternoon session, which was April 7th, 2024, just before he announced locations of 15 new temples. This is why we are doing all within our power, under the direction of the Lord, to make temple blessings more accessible to members of the church. Thus, we are pleased to announce that we plan to build a new temple in each of the following 15 locations. And then, I don't know why the article doesn't go into those locations, but anyways, you can refer back to his conference address to see what those were. In his Sunday morning session address, President Oaks taught, the Church of Jesus Christ is constructing temples all over the world. Their purpose is to bless the covenant children of God with temple worship and with the sacred responsibilities and powers and unique blessings of being bound to Christ they receive by covenant. The Church of Jesus Christ is known as a church that emphasizes making covenants with God. Covenants are inherent in each of the ordinances of salvation and exaltation this restored church administers. And in his Sunday morning session message on April 6th, President Eyring also underscored temples and covenants, saying that as Latter-day Saints attend the temple, they can be reminded of their eternal nature, relationship with the Father and His Son, and desire to return to their presence. My dear brothers and sisters, I bear witness that there is nothing more important than honoring the covenants you make, or may make, in the temple. No matter where you are on the covenant path, I urge you to qualify and become eligible to attend the temple. Visit as frequently as circumstances will allow. Make and keep sacred covenants with God. And it doesn't point it out here, but another part of President Eyring's message was that when trials happen in our lives, we can find peace and strength through those trials because of the blessings we receive in the temple. And he talks about an experience from his own life where he was able to have that peace and not have fear or worry come upon him. And then it goes over point number 2, the first time in 6 years, and each is past presiding at such events. The last time the 3 members of the First Presidency dedicated or rededicated temples in succession came in 2018, in the first year of the current presidency's tenure, which started with President Nelson being set apart as prophet and president of the church in January 2018. Within the first month, the late presiding M. Russell Ballard, then acting president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, was assigned to rededicate the Houston, Texas temple on April 22, 2018, with flooding damages from Hurricane Harvey in August 2017 requiring renovations. So the Houston temple was rededicated in 2018 after being renovated due to damage from a hurricane. After that, so that was the first temple dedicated during President Nelson's tenure as president, was by President Ballard. After that, the 3 First Presidency members each presided at the subsequent temple dedications and rededications in 2018. So if we're looking for a bookend, President Ballard dedicated the temple, and then President Eyring, Nelson, and Oaks did, in that order. And then now, again, we've had in the same order, President Eyring, Nelson, and Oaks. But to my knowledge, I don't think we've had another dedication since then, but that would complete the bookend, I guess. So then it talks about the rededications and dedications in 2018. President Eyring rededicated the Jordan River, Utah temple on May 20th that year. President Nelson dedicated the Concepcion, Chile temple on October 28th as part of his first ministry as the church's president of South America. And then President Oaks dedicated the Barranquilla, Colombia temple on December 9th that year. As a side note, all 3 members of the First Presidency attended and participated at the next temple dedication, that of the Rome, Italy temple, which was held over 3 days, March 10th through 12th in 2019. President Nelson dedicated the House of the Lord in the first dedicatory session. All members of the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12 Apostles were present for historic photographs on the temple grounds and in the visitor center, and President Oaks presided at later sessions. While the aforementioned dedications and rededications may have been the first for President Nelson, Oaks, and Eyring as the new First Presidency, it wasn't the first time any of the 3 had dedicated or rededicated temples. Previously, as a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, President Nelson had been assigned to rededicate the Nuku'alofa Tonga Temple in 2007 and the Sapporo, Japan Temple in 2016. He was also one of the first members of the 12 to be assigned to do a rededication of a special temple expansion project. In 1991, he rededicated an addition to the Sydney, Australia Temple, 7 years after its original dedication. And then that gives a note. For the purpose of this report, only full rededications are counted in tabulations, not the handful of such rededications of the temple's additions or baptistries. As president of the church, and in addition to the dedications of the Concepcion and Rome temples and the recent rededication of the Manti Temple, President Nelson rededicated the Washington, D.C. Temple in 2022. He also presided at the groundbreakings and site dedications for both the Ephraim, Utah and Heber Valley, Utah temples in 2022. And he has personally announced 168 new houses of the Lord since becoming president of the church. So since 2018, January 2018, since he became the president of the church at that time, he has announced 168 new temples. The article continues. As a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, President Oaks dedicated the Provo City Center Temple in March 2016. Since it is called as the First Presidency, and in addition to his dedication of the Barranquilla and Urdaneta temples, he has also dedicated the Richmond, Virginia Temple in 2023, and rededicated the Oakland, California Temple in 2019 and the Mesa, Arizona Temple in 2021. During his previous service as a First Presidency counselor to the late President Thomas S. Monson, during the latter's tenure leading the church, President Eyring dedicated 7 temples and rededicated 5 others. So that was while he was in the First Presidency with President Monson. President Eyring dedicated 7 temples and rededicated 5 others. The first being the 2011 dedication of the San Salvador, El Salvador Temple. And as a member of the church's First Presidency, and in addition to the rededication of the Jordan River Temple and the recent dedication of the Red Cliffs Temple, President Eyring has also dedicated the Saratoga Springs, Utah Temple in 2023 and rededicated the Oklahoma City, Oklahoma Temple in 2019 and the Tokyo, Japan Temple in 2022. And then the third point, evolving apostles in temple dedications and rededications. From the 1877 dedication of the St. George, Utah Temple, the church's oldest operating temple, to Sunday's dedication of the Urdaneta Temple, the church's president or presiding leader or a member of the First Presidency has dedicated 161 of the 190 houses of the Lord, with members of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles dedicating 29. So over the church's history, at least since the St. George, Utah Temple in 1877 until President Oaks' recent dedication just a couple weeks ago of the temple in the Philippines, the First Presidency has dedicated 161 out of the 190 temples in that time frame, with the Quorum of the 12 only dedicating 29 of those. That 161 total includes President Daniel H. Wells, the second counselor in the First Presidency, dedicating the St. George Temple in 1877, while President Brigham Young presided at the event. And it includes President Wilford Woodruff, the senior member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, who led the church for the 20-month apostolic interregnum following the 1887 death of President John Taylor, dedicating the Manti, Utah Temple in a private ceremony in 1888. As for the 44 temple rededications since President Spencer W. Kimball's 1975 rededication of the Mesa, Arizona Temple, church presidents have rededicated 17, with 15 by a First Presidency counselor and 12 by members of the Quorum of 12 Apostles. So 32 out of the 44 temple rededications have been done by members of the First Presidency, and 12 of the 42 have been done by Quorum of the 12 Apostles. President Nelson's tenure in leading the church will be known not only as a time for rapid temple expansion worldwide, but also for his extensive involvement of members of the Quorum of the 12 in temple dedications and rededications. So over the history of the church, it's more likely that a member of the First Presidency would have dedicated or rededicated the temple. But during President Nelson's time as president of the church, it would be more common for a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles to do that, less common for it to be one of the First Presidency. That's another reason why these last 3 temple dedications or rededications by President Nelson, President Oaks, and President Eyring is noteworthy. The article continues, of sharing the workload of a global church, including the temple dedications and rededications with his counselors and the members of the 12, he asked several questions during a 2019 interview in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Have you ever been a father and taken children on a fishing trip? Are you happy catching a fish, or are you happier watching your children catch a fish? So it sounds like he's letting members of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles do the dedication for similar reasons as why a father would want their child to catch the fish rather than the father catching all the fish while the child watches. In all, the current First Presidency has dedicated 7 temples and rededicated another 7 for a total of 14 dedications and rededications since January 2018. That's 29.2% of all the dedications and rededications of temples so far during their 6-year tenure. 48 total through the Urdaneta dedication. The remaining 70.8% of dedications and rededications over that time, 24 temple dedications and 10 temple rededications, have been assigned to members of the Quorum of the 12. And of the 8 upcoming temple dedications scheduled from May through October this year in 2024, all 8 have been assigned to be done by apostles. So those 8 already chosen, that is going to be Quorum of the 12 Apostles doing those. I guess unless, like the Manti, Utah Temple, there's a surprise and President Nelson, Oaks, or Eyring shows up. Of the 85 total temple dedications and rededications of President Hinckley's tenure from 1995 to 2008, and the 46 similar events during President Monson's time from 2008 to 2018, members of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles dedicated or rededicated houses of the Lord a total of 7 times. So out of 131 temple dedications or rededications between President Hinckley and President Monson, the Quorum of the 12 Apostles only dedicated or rededicated 7 of those. And the first came as the result of an airplane incident. In November 1999, President Gordon B. Hinckley was scheduled to dedicate temples on back-to-back days. The Halifax, Nova Scotia Temple on November 13th, and the Regina, Saskatchewan Temple on November 14th. So one of them in Canada, another in another place in Canada, back-to-back days. However, mechanical issues with the airplane President Hinckley was to use resulted in a day's delay. President Hinckley decided to dedicate the Halifax Temple a day later and have President Boyd K. Packer, the acting president of the Quorum of the 12, and who was already in Saskatchewan, preside at the Regina dedication on its scheduled date. The result, the Halifax and Regina Temple dedications both occurred on November 14th. They both happened on the same day, the first time 2 houses of the Lord were dedicated on the same day. In the final 2 years of President Hinckley's tenure as church president, 2 apostles rededicated renovated temples in the South Pacific. Elder L. Tom Perry, the Papit Tahiti Temple in 2006, and then Elder Nelson, the Nuku'alofa Temple in 2007. The aforementioned dedications in 2016 of the Sapporo, Japan, and Provo City Center temples by President Nelson and President Oaks were 2 of the 4 done by apostles during President Monson's time as church president. The other 2 were President Packer dedicating the Brigham City, Utah Temple in 2012, and Elder David A. Bednar, the Star Valley, Wyoming Temple in 2016. And then the article lists other times where 3 temples were dedicated in succession by 3 First Presidency members. When are the other times when 3 members of the previous First Presidencies have dedicated or rededicated temples in succession? It has happened with 4 previous church presidencies, all with dedications and not rededications. So it's happened with 4 previous church presidencies, all with temple dedications for new temples. President Monson dedicated the Phoenix, Arizona Temple in November 2014, the last of the 14 temple dedications he did as president of the church. His counselors dedicated the next 2 temples the following year, the Cordoba, Argentina Temple on May 17th by President Uchtdorf, who was the second counselor, and then the Payson, Utah Temple on June 7th by President Eyring, who was the first counselor. The 3 also dedicated temples in succession in 2011 and 2012. So the same First Presidency, President Monson, President Uchtdorf, and President Eyring. President Eyring, the San Salvador El Salvador Temple, August 21st, 2011. Elder Uchtdorf, the Quetzaltenango, Guatemala Temple on December 11th, 2011. And President Monson, the Kansas City, Missouri Temple, May 6th, 2012. During the year 2000, when 34 houses of the Lord were dedicated, that's a lot of temples to be dedicated in a year, by the way. 34 in the year 2000. There were 4 instances where President Hinckley and his counselors, who were President Monson and President Faust, dedicated temples in succession. So during that year, when 34 temples were dedicated, there were 4 times that year where, in succession, President Hinckley and his counselors dedicated 3 of those. And those include, in the spring of that year, President Faust dedicated the Tuxtla Gutierrez, Mexico Temple. On March 11th, President Monson dedicated the Louisville, Kentucky Temple on March 19th, and President Hinckley dedicated the Palmyra, New York Temple on April 6th that year. From late April through early June, the 3 First Presidency members dedicated 6 temples in back-to-back 3-for-3 sequences that include 2 instances of same-day dedications. The first 3 dedications by separate First Presidency members were President Hinckley dedicating the Cochabamba, Bolivia Temple on April 30th, President Monson the Tampico, Mexico Temple on May 20th, and President Faust dedicating the Nashville, Tennessee Temple on May 21st. About an hour later on May 21st, President Monson dedicated the Villahermosa, Mexico Temple, with President Hinckley dedicating the Montreal, Quebec temple on June 4th, and President Faust dedicating the San Jose, Costa Rica temple on June 4th. And then in July of that year, President Monson dedicated the Veracruz, Mexico temple on the 9th, President Hinckley the Baton Rouge, Louisiana temple on the 16th, and President Faust the Oklahoma City, Oklahoma temple on the 30th. So the year 2000, they were very busy dedicating temples. Very, very busy. During President Ezra Taft Benson's tenure as church president, which was from November 1985 to May 1994, he and his First Presidency counselors, who were President Hinckley and President Monson, they each dedicated temples in succession one time. So it just happened once during President Benson's tenure. In 1896, President Hinckley dedicated the Lima, Peru temple on January 10th, followed by the Buenos Aires, Argentina temple on January 17th, which was by President Monson, and much later the Denver, Colorado temple by President Benson on October 24th. And again, during President Kimball's tenure as church president, which was from December 1973 to November 1985, there were 3 temple dedications over a span of nearly 3 full years. So it took 3 years for these 3 temples to be dedicated, and those were the only 3 in that time, by different members of the First Presidency. On November 17th, 1980, President Kimball dedicated the Seattle, Washington temple. On November 16th, 1981, President Marion G. Romney, who was a second counselor, dedicated the Jordan River, Utah temple, and that was November 16th, 1981. And then on June 1st, 1983, President Hinckley, who was an additional First Presidency counselor, but by then was the second counselor, dedicated the Atlanta, Georgia temple. And then it gives a correction. A previous version of this report did not include the 3 dedications done in 2011-2012 in succession by President Monson and his counselors, President Eyring and Uchtdorf. So they added that in and we went over that. And that is the end of that article. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching. That was a lot to get through. But it just goes to show what happened this year over the last month and a half or so. The First Presidency, President Nelson, President Oaks, and President Eyring, all dedicating temples back to back, why it's a noteworthy thing. And why I think it's even more noteworthy that Elder Rasband was scheduled to rededicate the Manti Temple on April 21st. That was even announced. It was put out on Church News. It was put out on the Church of Jesus Christ website. And then on that day, President Nelson shows up in a surprise unannounced appearance and then was the one to rededicate the temple. Was that for a reason? I don't know. And then if you want to keep watching, we're just going to quickly go over a few paragraphs from President Nelson's blessing on the Manti, Utah temple dedication, and then President Oaks' blessing on the Philippines temple dedication. Just a few paragraphs. This is kind of bonus material, or you could say an appendix to this video. But I just thought it was neat to go through these because I don't get to read through these or hear these very often. So this is from President Nelson's dedicatory prayer for the Manti, Utah temple. He said, "We rededicate this magnificent temple to thee from its foundation to its towers." So this is a little bit into the prayer. This isn't the very beginning. "We rededicate each room for its intended and sacred purpose. Please bless the systems that will function here, mechanical, electrical, audiovisual, and all other supports and service functions of the temple. We rededicate its lovely decor, murals, altars, pulpits, hallways, and stairways, even just the halls and the stairs. Again, we dedicate this sacred ground on which this temple stands. We dedicate its firm foundation, that it may be sturdy and unfailing. Wilt thou protect this building and its surroundings from the elements and from anyone who might approach these sacred precincts with evil intent. Please bless the surrounding grounds, the shrubbery, flowers, and all that will beautify this sacred sector of San Pete Valley. Our beloved Father, please bless the present and future temple presidencies, the matrons and their assistants. Please bless all faithful workers who will serve in any way. We pray for all who enter and patronize this temple, that they may receive a sacred blessing. They may receive sacred blessings and remain worthy and faithful to their covenants made here. We pray also that this may be a house of peace, a house of comfort, and a house of personal revelation for all who enter these doors worthily. we ask thee to bless those who seek to understand the power with which they are endowed here to receive knowledge from on high. I'm not going to read it all. If you guys want to read it, it's on Church News, and I'll have the link in the description on this video. And then just a few paragraphs similarly from President Oak's prayer from the Urdaneta, Philippines temple. Again, this is not the very beginning, but he said, "We thank thee for the plan," and I wanted to include this because I just like the way he put this. "We thank thee for the plan thou hast established for the eternal life of thy children. We thank thee for thine only begotten Son, the Lord Jesus Christ, for his resurrection, for our mortality, for his atonement, for our repented sins, and for his experiencing all of our pains and infirmities, that he may strengthen us in our infirmities." That's really neat the way he puts that, and it's very true. Then later he said, "We thank thee for thy prophet, President Russell M. Nelson, from whom we have heard in this meeting. Please prolong his life and continue to reveal to him thy will for the progress of thy work among thy covenant children and all thy other children throughout the world." So during the dedication of the Urdaneta, Philippines temple, President Oaks is asking God to please prolong the life of President Nelson, who is almost 100 years old. What I know is I know that God is a God of miracles and that he can do anything. And just like with President Holland's recent experience where he was sick last year and in the hospital for, I think it was 6 weeks. For, I think 4 of those weeks, he was in and out of ICU, the intensive care unit. And a lot of people thought that President Holland was going to pass away. But miraculously, God has spared his life, and he's done it for a purpose. So if God needs to, if there's a purpose to, he can also preserve the life of President Nelson as he continues to age. All right, and then the last line I'm going to read from the dedicatory prayer that President Oaks gave. He said, "We pray that thou wilt protect this temple and all of its surrounding facilities from every destructive influence of any kind." And the reason I wanted to go over these is because I thought there were some interesting things in here, some interesting things said by President Nelson and President Oaks. And as I went through it, I kind of thought how they're dedicating a physical structure as a temple to the Lord, but also how our bodies are temples, and how a lot of the things they're saying in these dedicatory prayers can relate to ourself and our body and our life and things like that. When they're talking about foundations and, you know, all the different parts of the temple functioning in the way that they should and all that. Like, there's a lot of ways that we can relate that to our bodies being a temple, which they are. Thank you for making it all the way to the end. If you made it this far, I really appreciate it. If you liked this video, please like it. Please share your thoughts and your opinions in the comment section below. And please share this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I will see you next time.